Amen.
Well, Mike, again, thanks so much for being with us today. And this is going to go out on YouTube, so uh, other pastors, churches will be able to kind of um, just get a just get a sense, Mike, and kind of an overview. And that's kind of what I kind of want to do here is, what is it that you and Be the Church provides? You're with an organization called Be the Church. I want you to kind of introduce that organization as well and what you do. But I want to look at the material specifically because I think there's maybe some clarification that I want to make sure that happens with our pastors, that
Yeah.
they understand that, if they were to get involved in, your material here, this is kind of what would happen and how it would help them um, as they go forward. So first of all, introduce Be the Church for us and the organization that you're a part of right now.
Sure. So Be the Church exists for three primary reasons. We want to help strengthen churches. We want to equip leaders so that we can multiply kingdom impact on a local, regional, national, and global scale.
Hmm.
That is what we do. That is who we are. We're all about the kingdom, capital C church. We work all over the world and all across the country, and we are finding that we have a lot more in common than we do different.
Hmm.
A lot of the churches, whether you are in Western Europe or whether you are in the Bronx or whether you're in rural Kansas, face a lot of the same issues. They may look different, they may sound different, there may be different challenges that are specific to a context, but the overarching principles, remarkably, are consistent and the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, yeah. And when we first met up several years ago now, what I loved was the fact that you'd already had some a track record. You'd already had some success on Long Island and a number of different churches around you. Talk about that a little bit about, kind of the on-the-job training that you had with some of these churches and
Yeah.
pastors that you were
That's a good
working
way to
with.
put it. On the job training, I should have got a little hazard pay. I don't think that exists, but we should get it sometimes. I mean, listen, it started in our church, right? Walking in the door, having 40 people left, average age close to 70, wonderful senior saints, but they had lost a sense of direction and purpose.
Hmm.
Loved the Lord, didn't know how to love their community anymore because the community had changed around them.
Right.
And so it was just everything was a struggle. The simplest things were a struggle, whether it be Sunday school or a meeting, or it was always it was hard. And so part of the on-the-job training was just learning to love and lead and serve this local bride.
Yeah.
And God, over the years, I've learned a lot more from my failures than my successes. So I'm excited to share some of my failures so other people don't have to experience them. But by God's grace, our church turned around from 40 people to about 400. And we're continuing to grow. Now, that's not exactly linear. Revitalization, just so everyone who's watching this understands, it will not be a steady flight.
Yeah.
It's, slowly getting better and better. Sometimes you get a season of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it looks more like a roller coaster. And it's exciting, slightly dangerous, but certainly not boring. And so this church revitalized and then kind of got laid on our hearts is, hey, we want to see other churches get healthy again.
Yeah.
Because I live in a place where there's like 3.8 million people, give or take, Suffolk, Nassau County on Long Island, and there's less than 50 healthy churches.
Yeah.
So like, let's say our church grew to 1,000 or 1,500, which praise the Lord, right? There is
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But would we really be meeting the need in our context? And the answer to that question was no. So we said, okay, we're going to equally push not just on ourselves, but on churches around us. So what I started looking for, Doug, was, well, what do we have in common?
Hmm.
Like, what are the things that make a church a church?
Yeah.
No matter where you are, right? Church is going to have different music, different preaching styles, different cultures, different generations. But there has to be something, because the church is timeless, that ties it all together. And that's kind of what we found.
Yeah.
We just found there's a few key components, right? So every church is leadership. right? So whether you're an elder-led church, a pastor-led church, or you have a leadership team, like everyone has leadership in a local church, and every local church has a congregation, a body.
Yeah.
There's a group of people that gather under the banner of Jesus in that place, and it exists in a community,
Yeah.
right? They are heaven's embassy in that community, wherever that is, and then every church is going in a direction.
Mm,
And that's where it gets messy. A
mm,
lot of churches don't know which way to go. And so we just kind of boiled it down to the key components and started developing this cohort curriculum that people can walk through together.
yeah.
And we tested it, man, Doug, we tested it in the New York City metro. If you want to test it in the most diverse, complex place to see if you've learned how to simplify this good enough, New York City metro, my first cohort, we had an Egyptian church planter in Bensonhurst.
Mm,
We had a Korean pastor in the Upper West Side. We had a Filipino pastor from Jersey, a Haitian pastor from the Bronx. Like we're talking wildly different churches. We
mm.
had a church in more of a rural setting right here on Long Island, and we're all together. And the amazing thing, Doug, was that it worked for all of them,
Yeah,
which
there's a lot of diversity in what you just mentioned. Yeah.
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 I mean, this is the Northeast, right? But we found out that whether it was suburban, urban, or rural,
Yeah.
rich, middle class, or poor, no matter what the culture was, no matter what the primary language was, no matter how old or young the church was, what kind of music they listened to, what their leadership was, these key components, when we worked on them and assessed them individually, it all worked the same way and they all saw benefit and
Mm,
their churches started to get healthy.
yeah. Yeah.
So it was just awesome. It was an exciting time.
That's great. Um, Mike, I want to talk and I don't want to spend a lot of time because it's evident. The answer to my question is evident. The state of the local church here in the Northeast.
Yeah.
And when I first came on, I think I met you within just a couple of months of me starting out as uh, this director here of the Northeast. But at the same time, I also heard of a church, and I'm gonna share the picture with you so you can all see the picture. I started out, and this is what I heard of. This is First Baptist Church of Nauset, Massachusetts, out on the Cape.
Mhm.
They got down to about 5 members, and they were done. And they sold their building to the town for $1.
Oh,
And there it sits, right on the corner of Main Street, there in on, you know, a multi-million dollar piece of land there out on the Cape. And so that's what I walked into and realized there are many other churches that are right on death's doorstep like
we're
that.
on that trajectory. I
They're on
mean,
that trajectory. Yeah.
it's frustrating. We have a lot of churches that look like that, exactly like that in the Hamptons,
Mhm.
which if you can imagine what real estate costs in the Hamptons, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts because you want to help these local brides,
Yeah.
and you want to help these people, and you want a gospel light in that community. But so many of them lack trust.
Mhm.
They're mad. They're discouraged. The world has changed around them.
Yeah.
They're holding on to traditions more than transformation in Jesus,
Mhm.
more for their religious preferences than, leading people to a relationship with Jesus. Has become a very insular place. I call it us four and no more disease.
Yeah.
That the smaller we get, somehow we're more righteous. It's like an inverse relationship. And they would rather give it to the town or by us, we have Hindus and Muslims are buying churches for cash.
Mhm.
They just come in and they buy the property. It's an easy nonprofit transfer when you talk about like legality wise for the
Right.
state.
Yeah.
Um, and these are churches that have had people like me and others come and say, hey, listen, we'd love to either help you or plant a church in your building or have another church merge with you. And they're just incredibly resistant.
Yeah.
They've just lost that gospel love.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
struggling. And I don't want to beat up on them, right? I never want to beat up on a local bride ever.
Right.
But boy, does it hurt and is it frustrating.
Yeah. And I think that's part of my sadness. And I think some of the stress and heaviness of heart that I feel in this position. And there are some pockets and places of health and growth that I'm encouraged by, but yet at the same time,
Yeah.
there's a heaviness upon my heart for the bride here in the Northeast. And so I'll do whatever I can. So let's just talk. I want to talk about your assessment because this is what I want to bring clarity to for all the churches that are here in the hopes that they're going to kind of jump on. I think there's so much in it that is going to be helpful for them. So let's just talk about this. So this is the participants guide right here that I have, and it starts out with some assessments, right?
Yep.
Talk about some of the assessment process at the beginning.
Yeah, we want to help the pastor or pastoral staff, or the leadership team at that church understand where they're at,
Hmm.
right? Leadership does matter, right? And so often churches that are hurting, they have unhealthy pastors because they're in an unhealthy environment
Yeah.
and they're carrying this huge load, oftentimes by themselves, and they feel discouraged and frustrated. And so, what number one, we want to help the pastor regain their first love, for them to be healthier, for them to be encouraged. So spiritually, some of these pastors, I know because I was one of them, was doing so much other duties as required. Sermon prep became a burden, and forget
Hmm.
about devotional time.
Yeah.
We were busy doing so much, and so we do some spiritual assessments. Where are you at with your walk with the Lord?
Yeah.
Just because we got ordained doesn't mean we're in fellowship all the time,
Right.
and we can't make that mistake.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other one that is so big is emotional health.
Yeah.
You know, Pete Scazzaro, a New York guy, wrote a book on emotionally healthy spirituality.
Yeah.
And I had never in my lifetime heard or read a book that was so on point that dealt with the emotions of a believer, of a Christian, in a way that was biblical, but also practical
Yeah.
and sound. A lot of times I feel like if pastors admit, hey, I'm down, I'm discouraged, I'm depressed. I mean, Spurgeon had no problem admitting that, but
Yeah.
yet we think, like, well, the Spurgeon God, me, I'm good, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But there's so many emotionally unhealthy pastors. And of course, if you're spiritually and emotionally unhealthy, a lot of times physical unhealth comes out of that.
Yeah.
The stress of it, the weight of the stress. And then just professionally, right? I hate that word, but it's a good word to use in this context. The world went up and changed,
Hmm.
and nobody told us.
Yeah.
Like, you started seminary in the 70s or the 80s, you are not pastoring a church that resembles that at all. And if
Right.
you are, there might be five people left, and you're wondering what to do.
That's right.
Because they didn't train us for this. Even when I went to seminary, I was not trained for any of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just want to invest in the pastor first and the leaders first and get them to a place where they have a good idea of where they really are.
Yeah.
Because most of us aren't fine.
Yeah. You can't fix what you don't know is broken.
Right.
You've got to be aware of certain unhealthy patterns in your own life, in your church, and like you said, seminaries didn't always do such a great job of training those things, equipping us in those things.
It was a different culture. It
Yeah.
was different needs. Like there was no need to talk about technology or social media. Yeah, pastors always counseled, but not at the level that's needed now.
Right.
I mean, they didn't have to deal with how to handle a public policy pandemic discussion.
Hmm.
And political things were always political, but they weren't like this. I mean, I
Right.
remember, listen, I'm old enough that I remember when family would say, "Who are you voting for?" They would say, "We don't talk about that," where it was not your business. And you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, and so it's such a different environment to shepherd people in these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we just want to help the pastor like grow in those areas.
Yeah. Move on from there and talk a little bit more as you're, getting to know your community. I love that because, um, part of my job or part of what I offer, what I can offer to churches is through mission insight and the
Yeah.
demographics studies. But boy, it takes a PhD
Yeah.
sometimes to figure those demographic studies out too,
Oh,
and
it's
how,
like drinking water out of a fire hose. But
yeah.
before we even get to that, though, part of what we then do is we want to expand to the congregation,
Mm,
right? And so we do a lot of church health surveys and discuss things, so it's really healthy because what happens is it's called inattentional blindness. You only see what you expect to see. And here's why I explain this concept.
mm,
In your own home, if you decide to sell your home, a real estate agent will come in and say, hey, listen, you're missing a piece of molding in the bathroom. Hey, there's spackle in the second bedroom that has never been painted. Are you doing that?
mm.
You don't see it anymore,
Yeah.
right? It's just your house. It's your bathroom. It's that bedroom. It doesn't bother you. And so you don't do anything about it. And so a lot of churches kind of slowly seep into this sense of unhealth. But the truth is they don't see it anymore
Yeah.
because their closest friends are still there normally. And sure, maybe there's not any young families,
Mm,
but man, culture has changed, and maybe no one has gotten saved in 10 years, but culture has changed, and everything comes back to we blame culture,
mm,
right? And one of the things I like to say to people is we don't shoot POWs, and everyone who knows Jesus, doesn't know Jesus, is a prisoner of war. They're not an enemy combatant. The
mm.
only enemy we have is Satan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone else we're told to set free. So we do these church health assessments, and what we found, and this is consistent across
Mm,
the entire country, across every demographic, no one can run from this, no one can hide from this. There are three things we have found that every dying church or a church in serious decline does not do well or often,
mm.
right? You
Yeah.
want to guess what the first one is?
I, I could, I got a list this long.
Right?
I don't know. Well,
Evangelism.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, okay, so we're not sharing the good news about Jesus.
Yeah.
Check. The second thing we don't do, discipleship.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so we just found out over the past 7 or 8 years that every church we've ever surveyed in decline doesn't do the Great Commission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're not growing healthier. The third thing we don't do, and these are in a row, consistent for every single church,
Hmm.
is we don't pray.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not sharing the gospel, there's power in the gospel.
Yeah.
We're not being disciples because we're not making disciples.
Yeah.
And then we're not praying, and we go, well, why is this all not working?
Hmm.
I'm just saying there's a book called the Bible, and those things were kind of highlighted throughout as important
Yeah.
to the local church.
Hmm.
And so what happens for pastors when we start assessing this, because it's self-assessment,
Mm-hmm.
the church, the actual members or attendees are assessing these things, is you can't fight it because
Mm.
the data is based on your input,
Yeah.
not my opinion.
Right.
And so these pastors and these cohorts are going, wait a second, it's not only my church, it's your church too? Okay, good. All right, good. I thought it was just me, and I felt that, but I couldn't put a name to it. I felt it, but I didn't quite know how bad it was. And so, as much as it sounds horrible to learn these things,
Mm.
it's almost like getting surgery,
Yeah.
right? You have to cut to get to the disease so it can start to heal. You don't want to put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, right?
Right.
So that's like step one is we get the pastor healthy. Step two, we start to get the church body healthy.
Right.
They're in this together now. Now we can start talking about the community.
Yeah. And that makes total sense because you you can't skip over that very important step of your own church health to get to the community when you've got no church backing
Right.
you and helping you
Right.
reaching that
Number one,
community.
you can't do it alone.
Right.
Number two, I know like I've heard this a million times. Like all we need, like a 75-year-old pastor, like, listen, Mike, can you help me find a 40-year-old pastor with two kids, you know what I mean, between the ages of 8 and 15, and whose wife can lead worship, and then everything will be fine. I
Yeah.
mean, that everything will not be fine.
Yeah, no.
There is no silver bullet. And
Right.
so, or if we just do a big outreach, yeah, but then they show up and they don't want to come back because the church is unhealthy.
Let me ask you a question about church, the church health assessment and really doing that analysis work, because it takes more than just the pastor himself to uh, um, to give a kind of his own opinion
Yep,
of his own from his own point of view. That's too myopic, right? It's too
that's right.
so there's got to be more individuals speaking into this process, right? How do you achieve that?
So we kind of assess with the pastors, hey, like how many people are left? Like, who are your key members that you want to take this? Some pastors decide, hey, we have 40, 50 people left. We're going to send it to everyone. Everyone won't take it. We try to pick assessments and we let the facilitators of the cohorts kind of guide which assessment, depending on the context. But about half will take it.
Yeah.
And as long as we have about, half of the congregation taking it, whether it's 5 out of 10 or 20 out
Mm,
of 40, it tends to give us a more well-rounded view.
it's great.
Because even the pastor sees things through rose-colored glasses, right? Like
Yeah.
we all see things through our perception, which isn't always accurate.
Yeah. Yep. It's great. That's so good. And then once you've got more of a good understanding of where your own church is at and where it needs to go and how it needs to develop and what it needs to grow in, then you can begin to move towards the
Yep.
community analysis and really looking at the demographics of your
Yeah.
community. But
Now
yeah,
you're ready to meet new friends. Now you're ready to
yeah,
meet your neighbors, and you're on the same page, which helps.
right.
At this point, you're all moving forward, and you haven't had to do a tremendous amount of work, but there's a sense of, all right, we can do this. Like, all right, like things
Mm,
haven't been good, but now what's next? Now, how do we fix this? And so we start by just getting back to the heartbeat of the Great Commission,
yeah.
right? You're there to reach your neighborhood. So let's just start with your neighborhood, which most likely has changed in the
Hmm.
past 20 years.
Right. Right.
I mean, I don't know many places in the country where it hasn't changed.
Right.
So I live in a place where change is pretty constant.
Mm,
Not as bad as the city. Like
yeah.
in 5 years, a little neighborhood in Queens can literally change ethnicities and language
Yeah.
completely in
Yeah.
5 years.
Right.
But even out on Long Island, what we're seeing is we have a lot of Latinos, South Asians, Caribbean Americans, moving into our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
A lot of people from the city that want out of the city are now coming out to the suburbs,
Yeah.
and things are shifting. So when I graduated high school in this neighborhood in 92, so
Mm,
I'm old, okay? We had a handful of people of color from different cultures
mm,
within our entire high school.
mm,
Last year, it was over 50% of the graduating class.
mm.
That is a shift.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to learn how to reach the people who live on the blocks in your neighborhood now, not the ones when you move there. They're most likely gone.
Right.
And so learning who lives, in your blocks, in your community, and not just who they are, not just the raw data. It's important
Yeah.
to know culture and socioeconomic status, level of education. All those things are great indicators to help you understand, as some would say, exegete your community, not just the scripture, right?
Right.
But also their psychographics. What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What do they believe in?
Right.
Do they have a level of faith already? And so once you start to get that picture of
Mm,
who really does live around you,
yeah.
it helps shape what you're going to do next. You're not just throwing darts at a board with a blindfold on,
Right.
because sometimes that's what we do because we're
Yeah.
desperate.
Yeah.
And what happens though, Doug? We do that and it doesn't work. And then we go, well, we tried it and it didn't work.
That's right.
And that's repeated for 10 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're so true. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, instead of, all right, reassessing and figuring out what our next step is after that.
Right. Why did it fail? Did we not do it well? Did we not promote it well? Where did we promote it? Or a million questions you can ask yourself and be reflective. But when you're already down and
Yeah.
you try one thing that doesn't work, it's just really easy just to not do it again. It feels emotionally safer not to do it again.
Right.
So now we've assessed the community. We know who's in our community, and we've learned some things. It's like gold mining with a pan.
Yeah.
You have to sift for the nuggets
Yeah.
because you get this report like this big, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But if you just take your time
Yeah.
and go to some key sections,
Hmm.
you'll learn some things that'll be super helpful. So for us, like we learned that because of our school district
Mm.
and our taxes, which by Long Island standards are reasonable. If I said them out loud and you're not in the Northeast or on Long Island, you may go, that's crazy. But
Hmm.
for us, it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Young families are able to buy into our community.
Mm. Hmm.
And so we are growing in young families.
Mm.
So we know that when we're going to reach into our community, that has to be part of the strategy,
Right.
is considering the young families.
Yeah.
We had a church in, I think was it Eastern Michigan? It was Eastern Michigan, where they found out that they had 4 times the number of the national average of single moms.
Mm.
And so they had no children in their church, and they're living in a community that now has this massive number of single moms. And so that told them something that, oh, there's an area that we can show the love of Jesus, right?
Right.
So they started like after school programs and they started doing some summer things with backpack drives
Mm.
you know, and it worked. Why? Because that's who's living around them and that was meeting their needs.
Yeah.
But then there are some that have nothing to do with families and
Yeah.
nothing to do with kids. We have one in the neighborhood that had changed over and there was like it was zero point 0.8 children per family.
Mm.
So barely a full kid per household.
Yeah.
And so they were all high achievers, high earners, high educated people. And so they had to do something totally different.
Mm.
They couldn't just store a VBS for that community.
Yeah.
There was 8 kids.
Yeah.
You didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
And so our last step in this whole process, Doug, is just taking what we've learned.
Yeah.
We're healthier now as leaders. We've learned what our strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
We've learned where our church is strong and where it's weak.
Hmm.
Now we know who's in our community. And now we can say, where's any low-hanging fruit,
Mm. Hmm.
right? Where does the one or two things, not a 3-year plan, not a 5-year plan,
Yeah.
right? What are the one or two things we can do this year
Yeah.
that will start the revitalization process?
Yeah.
Because it's not a silver bullet. I wish I could tell you, Doug, do this once,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden in a year you'll have 400. That's not how it works.
Right. 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 It's being faithful
Yes.
to that process of strategizing, looking at the data and saying, we're just going to keep on keeping on and we're not going to
You're going to
give
be
up.
consistent. Like,
Yeah.
be faithful in the small things,
Yep. Yep.
right? Consistency isn't sexy. I always say this. Like, no one names their conference Consistency Now. Like, no one would sign up. But the truth is, we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 3 years.
Yep.
3 years of consistent small wins adds up to a huge shift.
And that's been for me what has been why things have happened here. 36 years of just trying to be faithful,
Yep.
starting out with 20 people and now just seeing the things happening here at Faith on the back end and just I just love being in the room and just watching it all happen now. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a cool season right now. I
it
mean, I
really
think
is.
God is moving in a very distinct way in the
Yeah.
Northeast.
Yes, I
And so there's a
agree.
lot of stuff we have to deal with and be honest about, and it hurts to talk about. But the good news is that the good news still works and
Right.
that God is still on the move.
So our hope, Mike, and I know you're a part of this kind of scheme of trying to put cohorts together
Yep.
throughout the Northeast, and one of the places where we're going to really strategize, talk about this is at our annual conference coming up on October 12th, 13th, and 14th. And you're going to kind of run kind of a mini
Yep.
overview seminar there, a breakout session, for those pastors that are saying, yeah, I want to sign up for this. I need to be a part of a cohort like this because the best way you can do this is with a bunch of other guys in the room who are all struggling with the same things you're
100%.
struggling with. And so that's where we're going to really capitalize and say, okay, let's get us all together in the same room and let's start developing some cohorts throughout the Northeast, New
I mean,
York.
cohorts
Yeah,
work. I mean,
yeah,
and why does it work?
yeah.
Because we're made in the image of God, and God has always lived in community. We are designed to do everything in community. We're more effective that way.
Yeah,
And so cohorts, I people, oh, it's another cohort. No, it's an opportunity to be in a gospel-centered community, right? And to not be alone and not to do this alone. And
that's right.
we have people from cohort 7 years ago that
Yeah,
are still friends. They
yeah,
know their wives' names, they know their kids' names, they go for lunch sometimes. Like when something's wrong in their church, they call the other pastor,
yeah.
and it's peer to peer, and they're helping one another, and they're in relationship, and it's just awesome to see that.
I know.
Who wants to do this alone?
Yeah, you're right. You're
I,
right.
I didn't do it alone, and I wouldn't
No,
want anyone else to do it alone.
yeah. So we've got some cohorts that are already kind of underway and and some of them may be involved. My cohort here in Central Mass, we're actually talking about doing some church planting together.
Nice,
Go,
nice.
go figure that for the first time in a long time, um, Venture is talking about doing some church planting here in the Northeast, which is phenomenal. I'm excited. There aren't enough healthy, um, you know, great commission minded churches here in the Northeast. So we just realized, yeah, we need another one here in Central Mass, and our five churches may try to get together and figure out how to do that. But at the same time, this may be something we need to do on our own as well as a cohort. So
Yeah, I mean, listen, you got to strengthen churches right before you start churches
yeah,
because healthy churches will plant healthy churches. Unhealthy churches are just trying to survive. Healthy churches are starting to thrive, right?
yeah,
So that's why Be the Church exists. Like, we want to be the least known leaders in the largest movement since the last Great Awakening.
right.
And so we just do three things. That's all we do. We strengthen churches. We have a lot of revitalization and church health resources, cohorts, curriculum. We do one-day micro conferences, and then we equip leaders. We're designing these online and facilitated courses within local churches
Mhm.
through the Spiritual Leadership Institute to help local pastors raise up leaders from the harvest for the harvest.
Yeah,
So, so for someone who's 25 to 55 who has a call
yeah,
and may not leave their job and may not go to full seminary, but still wants to serve the Lord in a serious way,
yeah.
has a pathway. Because we really do believe that lay leaders are the key to the next movement.
That's right.
Not us, not me,
No,
not you, not the communicator, the lay leaders. And if
yeah,
they get on board, unstoppable.
that's right.
We want to equip leaders, and then we want to help multiply impact. So one of the ways we do that is do what you guys are doing.
Yeah,
We partner with healthy churches that want to become a multiplication center.
yeah,
And so they start training up and planting and replanting. And next thing you know, an entire region
yeah,
has been impacted by one church.
yeah.
And I'll take that win all day long.
Amen. Amen. That's what we're praying for and hoping for, brother. That's what I want to see happen. Um, I just want to thank you for what you're providing here. This is, we have needed the structure to accomplish this, and what your material has done is actually give us some some systemic health to all this, providing a system to actually get us all going in the same direction here, which is great. So thank you
Yeah,
for
it's
doing that.
simple, right? It's simple. I find that we've made this way too complex.
Yeah,
And it has to be, and the good news is the way the church is designed to work is fairly simple.
yeah,
So we're just stepping back into the book of Acts. I wish I could say it was something that was so radical that no one ever thought of this before.
I know.
But, I'm just blessed enough that God is using me a small part of
Yeah,
what he's doing right now.
amen. Hey, one question comes to us
Yes.
from Josh here, and the question is, what are some tools and or strategies you use to recruit and train lay leaders? What do you use, Mike?
So at our church, we kind of have a distinct process by which we enter into a relationship. We definitely we see people as everyone's a guest, and then they become a friend, and in the prayers they become family.
Yeah.
and sort of things that go along with that. When someone gets to the friend stage and they're starting to become family, they're going to stick and they're going to stay.
Yeah.
And we start to see that. And I sense that there's some leadership on their life. What we do is we have these discipleship groups that aren't heavy on material. They're
Mm.
heavy on life to life.
Yeah.
So I have like 8 guys I'm working with right now. I met with them last night. And so sometimes we go walking down by a beach. Sometimes we grab lunch and talk. Sometimes we're at the church. And so we catch up on each other's lives. Sometimes I'll bring a resource.
Mm.
I love spiritual leadership by J. Oswald Sanders.
Yeah.
Or
Amen.
there's an article that somebody writes. We talk about it. Last night was bring me a Bible verse or a Bible concept that you've never quite liked or understood, but never had the courage to ask. And we just chopped it up a little bit and we
Mm.
just talked about it. And out of that has grown someone to go, that person is a leader.
Yeah.
And then what I start doing is inviting them into my world on a more one-on-one basis. Hey, will you lead this with me?
Yeah.
Will you help me at this event?
It's good.
So it's not over, once again, it's not complicated.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a ton of resources. It does take some time though,
Right.
right? An investment of time for sure.
One of the things, Josh, we're going to actually be kind of addressing at the conference coming up in October is how do you build discipleship pathways? What is the journey? And every church kind of needs to figure its own strategy out, but it needs to have a pathway. And so we're going to actually address that. One of our breakout sessions is going to be all on that.
You know what's a very cool resource that we're going to go church wide with? We've done some pilots. Rooted.
Mm,
The Rooted experience
mm,
is incredible at Eric Geiger's church. It puts a lot of practicality to deep theology.
mm.
And so it's not just come and learn, but it's come, learn, feel, and do.
Yeah,
So that's going to be part of our discipleship, not the entire strategy, but a
that's
component of
great.
it. So that's one thing I would recommend.
That's great. Well, again, for everybody listening, October 12th, 13th, and 14th, I just was talking with Brian Wilkerson this morning. He is going to be our kickoff lead plenary session speaker. Brian served at Grace Chapel in Lexington for many years. He was one of our former CB pastors down at Manhasset, which is now called Shelter Rock, down in your neck of the woods, Mike. And Brian was there for many years, and Grace Chapel scooped him up, but he's coming back to us, and he's going to be our keynote speaker the first night, Sunday night. And I know y'all are going to want to hear that. And then the very first thing in the morning, he's going to be doing a kind of a preaching seminar first thing. And then Mike, you're I think going to be serving or going to be doing your breakout session after his.
Fantastic.
So yeah,
Looking forward to it.
great, man. Thank you so much, brother. Josh, I'm going to ask you if you would mind praying for Mike right now.
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. Father, I thank you that you have given us this opportunity today to be poured into by one of your followers, Lord, who has so much experience and, as he said, so much experience both in failures and success, and he's learned from both. And he's taken those things and put them into written material for the equipping of your saints. And so, Lord, I do pray that from this meeting and from the recording that goes online and those who share this with others, Lord, that they would create fruit and momentum, and that you would at least it would create excitement
Hmm.
and encouragement to the hearts of those who hear that things are happening here in the Northeast, that we do not live in a spiritual wasteland that is dead, but we live in a spiritual wasteland with seeds that are
Hmm.
growing from the fires of
Hmm.
of the past. Lord, thank you for your spirit that continues to grow. And I just pray as Mike and his ministry goes, and Doug and his ministry, and those watching, that we would all just continue to trust you and your spirit would move.
Hmm.
And it's in your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Wonderful. Thanks. All right, guys. Appreciate it. And we
Can I
will
ask
see
one
you.
question
Yeah, absolutely.
to Mike?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, you talked about Rooted, and I've been getting their newsletters for forever. Um, Would you recommend New Rooted's 12-month mentorship programs? Because I've looked at it and I've kind of been like, oh, the youth ministry one looks good. Because I got a degree from Moody in just general pastor, and now I'm a youth pastor, and I'm like, well, I could do that, but it's big, long commitment and it's a lot of money. But if you're here and you're like, I would totally recommend it, then
Yeah,
I
I don't know much about their mentorship program. I mean,
okay.
their rooted experience itself, the 10-week discipleship stuff is fantastic. It comes out of Eric Geiger's church. Eric Geiger was the one who wrote Simple Church. That was
Yep.
his dissertation, and Rayner made it popular. But I have a high respect for Eric because like he could have went on like the conference chain and worked for a lot of money at Lifeway and had like that the dream, right? Like I made it. And like he said, "No, I'm gonna stay a local pastor. That's my call." Yet he wrote one of the most influential books of our time for local churches. So that's what kind of kept me looking at his work. So I tend to trust what he does, but I can't honestly say I know a lot about that program, if that
Mhm.
Sweet. All right.
helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right.
All right,
Well,
fellas. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
again,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Mike, so much.
Thank
God
you.
bless you all. Thanks.
All right, talk to you soon.
We'll see you in October. All right.